One explosion changed weather across the entire planet. Imagine waking up in the middle of June, walking outside, and getting hit in the face by a blinding blizzard. Imagine the year is 1816. You are a farmer in New England. You've spent months planting your crops, praying for a good harvest to feed your family. But summer never arrives. Instead, the sky is a bizarre, sickly shade of brown. The sun looks like a dim, ghostly blue coin in the sky, completely stripped of its warmth. Birds are freezing to death mid-air, dropping straight into the snow. People around you are starting to panic. They think the world is ending. They think God has abandoned them. But what they don't know, what no one on Earth knows yet, is that their nightmare started a year earlier, thousands of miles away on a remote island they've never even heard of. One single explosion had just rewritten the weather across the entire planet, and the chaos was only just beginning. Chapter 1. The Day the Earth Exploded. Sumbawa, 1815. To understand how the world went dark, we have to travel back to April 5th, 1815. The place is the island of Sumbawa in modern-day Indonesia. Towering over the tropical landscape is Mount Tambora, a massive dormant volcanic peak. For centuries, it sat there quiet, peaceful. But deep underground pressure had been building for thousands of years. And when it finally blew, it didn't just erupt. It tore the planet open. The initial blasts were so insanely loud that British soldiers more than 800 miles away in Sumatra thought they were hearing heavy artillery fire from an invading army. They actually sent out troops looking for a battle. But the real nightmare began on April 10th. That's when Mount Tambora literally ripped itself apart. To put this into perspective for you, if you've heard of the famous Krakatoa eruption of 1883, Tambora was 4 times more powerful. It was roughly 52,000 times more powerful than the Hiroshima atomic bomb. The volcano shot a column of toxic ash and gas 27 miles straight up into the atmosphere. The sheer force generated pyroclastic flows, avalanches of superheated gas and rock moving at hundreds of miles per hour that raced down the mountain. They instantly vaporized the entire kingdom of Tambora. More than 10,000 people died in mere minutes. The water around the island turned into a graveyard choked with massive rafts of floating pumice stone and trees. The mountain itself, which used to stand at over 14,000 feet, lost a third of its height in a matter of days. It was a localized apocalypse. But the true horror of Mount Tambora wasn't what it did to Indonesia. It was what it left behind in the sky. Chapter 2. The Fog That Blotted Out the Sun. You see, when a volcano explodes with that kind of apocalyptic power, it doesn't just blast out ash. It shoots millions of tons of sulfur dioxide gas directly into the stratosphere. Once it was up there high above the clouds where no rain could wash it away, a chemical reaction occurred. The gas combined with water vapor to create a massive global blanket of highly reflective sulfate aerosols. Think of it like a giant planetary mirror. This invisible mirror started reflecting the sun's warmth back out into deep space, blocking the energy our planet needs to survive. Over the next few months, global jet streams carried this toxic veil across the entire globe. By the time winter transitioned into spring in 1816, a strange permanent dry fog settled over parts of the United States and Europe. It was a bizarre, hazy mist that wouldn't clear no matter how hard the wind blew. It was so thick you could actually look directly at the sun with the naked eye without hurting your vision. Sunspots were clearly visible to people standing on the ground. Back then, science wasn't advanced enough for people to connect the dots. No one in Boston or London or Paris had any idea that a mountain in Indonesia had just broken the global climate. They just knew something was profoundly wrong. The atmosphere was completely starved of heat, and as the calendar crawled closer to the summer months, a massive, unprecedented humanitarian crisis was brewing right on American soil. Chapter 3. 1816. The year without a summer. May 1816 arrived and people expected the usual warmth of spring. Instead, a brutal, unnatural cold front slammed into the northeastern United States. In places like Maine, New York, and New Hampshire, temperatures plummeted below freezing almost every single night. Then came June. On June 6th, a massive blizzard dumped nearly a foot of snow across New England. People were walking through snowdrifts in the dead of summer, wearing heavy winter coats just to go to the market. Farmers who had already replanted their crops 2 or 3 times watched in absolute horror as morning after morning a thick killing frost coated their fields. In July and August, the story didn't change. Every time the weather seemed to warm up just a little bit, a fresh wave of Arctic air would scream down from Canada, freezing the ground solid. Ice formed on lakes and rivers in the middle of August. The corn crops, the literal lifeblood of early America, were completely obliterated. The stalks died in the fields, black and rotted. Because there was no grain, livestock began to starve to death. Food prices skyrocketed overnight. A bushel of oats that used to cost 12 cents suddenly shot up to 92 cents. People were genuinely starving. They were forced to forage in the woods, eating wild herbs, raccoons, and pigeons just to keep their children alive. This triggered one of the greatest mass migrations in American history. Thousands of desperate, starving families packed up everything they owned into covered wagons and abandoned New England entirely. They fled west, searching for warmer climates and fertile soil. This catastrophic volcanic winter accidentally accelerated the settlement of the American heartland, forcing people into Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois. It felt like a scary campfire story, but for the people living through it, it was a waking nightmare. And America wasn't alone. Chapter 4: Global Chaos and the Monsters It Created. If you think the United States had it rough, Europe was experiencing an absolute catastrophe. The continent was already completely broken, trying to recover from the devastation of the Napoleonic Wars. Then Tambora's cloud arrived. 1816 became the worst famine Europe experienced in the entire 19th century. In Ireland, the wheat and potato crops failed completely due to endless freezing rain. In Switzerland, the famine was so severe that people resorted to eating moss and boiling old leather just to fill their stomachs. Desperate, starving mobs broke into bakeries and rioted in the streets of England and France, demanding bread. The social order was collapsing. Meanwhile, altered weather patterns caused the monsoon season in India to completely disrupt, triggering a massive mutation in the bacteria water supplies. This unleashed a devastating global cholera epidemic that killed millions of people worldwide. But human resilience does something fascinating when it's pushed to the brink of extinction. The global chaos of 1816 actually forced some of the most famous cultural and technological breakthroughs in human history. Because the crops failed, there was no oats or hay to feed horses. As horses starved to death by the thousands, people lost their primary source of transportation. This forced a German inventor named Carl Dreiss to look for an alternative. His solution? A 2-wheeled human-powered machine called the Lauf machine, which we know today as the very first bicycle. At the exact same time over in Switzerland, a young English author named Mary Shelley was spending her summer vacation at Lake Geneva with her friends. Because the weather was so continuously gloomy, stormy, and freezing, they were trapped indoors for days on end. To pass the time, they challenged each other to write the scariest ghost story they could think of. Inspired by the dark, apocalyptic atmosphere outside her window, Mary Shelley sat down and wrote a masterpiece about a scientist who brings a creature to life using lightning. That miserable volcanic summer directly birthed the story of Frankenstein. It is crazy to think that a single volcanic eruption on a distant island could completely alter human history, create monsters, invent technologies, and starve entire nations. But here's the most chilling thought of all. Mount Tambora isn't an isolated event. Volcanoes like it, and even larger supervolcanoes like the one sitting right under Yellowstone National Park, are still active today. Our modern global food supply chain is incredibly complex, and it relies entirely on stable, predictable weather. If an eruption on the scale of 1815 happened tomorrow, the resulting global freeze wouldn't just cause a migration to the west. It could collapse our entire global civilization in a matter of weeks. The Earth did it once, and it will eventually do it again. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. If you want to discover more insane, forgotten moments in human history where our world almost ended, click the video on your screen right now. Drop a like, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you in the next documentary.